With a scorching sun above and not a cloud in sight, the country braced for a ruthless year, one that would test the resilience of a predominantly agrarian economy, deepen food insecurity, and upend the lives of millions who depended on farming. The year was 1987, and it all began thousands of kilometers away off the coast of Peru. By the end of 1986, the waters of equatorial Pacific turned unusually warm. It was clear El Niño had arrived. With that, India was about to turn dry. Train after train moved across the countryside, rushing water and fodder from one state to another. An unforgiving dry spell had brought much of the country to a standstill. Parched lips, withered crops, and endless stretches of barren land became the defining images. The drought of the century had engulfed almost the entire country, hitting the northern granaries and western states the hardest. Wells dried up and reservoirs shrank to depressingly low levels. The air was thick with fear, a sense of deja vu set in. The horrors of the 1979-1980 drought came rushing back. The army had been called in, not to fight, but to distribute water through military trucks and trains. The government, with sweat lining the brows, chose to maintain a calm facade. Beneath the calm, however, was a faint sense of optimism that the rain gods will show some mercy. Nearly two-thirds of the country's landmass was in the grip of drought. Hi, I'm Manya Gupta and welcome to ThePrint. At first, however, 1987 seemed like any other year. The southwest monsoon had arrived on the shores of Kerala by 2nd June. Its usual time, the moisture-bearing winds progressed steadily along the west coast. Soon the Bay of Bengal branch brought heavy showers to Andaman and Nicobar Islands before rain swept the hills and plains of northeast India. Bihar and Bengal too were drenched in monsoon showers. However, all of a sudden, the winds halted. An anticyclonic circulation or high-pressure zone developed over the Indian Ocean and northwest India, suppressing any advancement of monsoon across Indian subcontinent. It seemed the rain gods had turned a blind eye. No amount of prayers could soften their hearts. July was even worse, and the deficiency became severe. Regions that normally receive abundant rainfall, the Gangetic Belt, central India, and the Western Ghats, were gripped by prolonged dry spells, receiving less than half their normal rainfall. Worst hit were the Kharif crops, sown in June and July on the hopes of generous monsoon. Yet the prolonged dry spells in both these months quelled all hopes into despair. A question mark hung over 60% of India's food grains. A sense of uncertainty also loomed over the fate of rabi crops, due to be sown in the coming winter. In Gujarat, which produces the bulk of India's groundnuts, no sowing was recorded in nearly 75% of groundnut growing areas. In Rajasthan, bajra bore the brunt. The drought was particularly severe in Uttar Pradesh, affecting 50 of state's 57 districts, prompting Chief Minister Veer Bahadur Singh to remark, "We have never had such a bad dry spell. Nearly 40% of rice saplings never made it out of the nurseries." Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Rajasthan reeled under severe drinking water stress. Water tables dwindled, wells pumped salty and brackish water. Soon, livestock was caught in this deepening crisis. Fodder became so scarce that farmers in several villages in Gujarat put a red tilak on their bulls' forehead and let them loose to fend for themselves. India's drought is worst in decades, read a New York Times headline on 16th of August. Large parts of the country plunged into darkness as electricity was diverted to farmlands. Even the heavily irrigated states of Punjab and Haryana were not spared. The perils, however, do not end in the fields. What this sets off is a domino effect, disrupting food supplies, soaring prices, shrinking disposable income, weakening rural demand, and hurting industries dependent on agricultural output. With the arrival of August came a glimmer of hope. Rain-bearing clouds reached even the western corners of the country. But by then, the damage was already done. After 4 consecutive years of poor monsoon, the drought of 1987 left scars that millions would never forget. By the end of the season, India had recorded a 19% rainfall deficit. As many as 21 of the country's 35 meteorological subdivisions, representing two-thirds of India's landmass, recorded a deficient or scanty rainfall. For a country where nearly two-thirds of the population depend on agriculture for a living and over 70% of the cultivated area still remained rain-fed, 1987 became a year etched into nation's memory. The monsoon crisis and subsequent drought could not have come at a worse time. It was a period when Rajiv Gandhi, India's Prince Charming, known for his charisma, youth, and fascination with computers, was losing his sheen. Gandhi's carefully crafted image as Mr. Clean came crashing down under the weight of Shah Banu debacle and the massive Bofors scam controversies that defined his tenure. By then, the stakes were already running high for the government. For 6 straight days, lawmakers debated every aspect of the crisis. Every speech carried an appeal, a demand, or a suggestion. Bombarded with accusations and struggling with fading political appeal, the government faced rising disappointments from all quarters. Karnal MP Chiranji Lal Sharma stood up and said, "Today, the drought situation has made everybody uneasy. The farmers, the laborers, whoever it may be, when he looks at the sky, what does he see in the blue sky? He sees poverty, starvation, and destruction." MPs took turns presenting their plights for their respective states and constituencies. Members from Gujarat spoke of empty fields. Those from Andhra spoke of villages parched beside the Godavari. In Madhya Pradesh, with no work available, farmers resorted to reciting the Ramayana. With national resources limited, a political tussle soon emerged as each MP insisted that the needs of their region demanded immediate attention.
In Gujarat, where drought had damaged 80% of the crops, Valsad MP Uttam Bhai Harji Bhai Patel demanded rupees 187 crore in relief, insisting that the condition of Gujarat is several times more serious than that of other parts of the country.
Speaking for Andhra Pradesh, when 19 of the state's 23 districts were reeling under critical drought, Sri Hari Rao launched an offensive and accused the centre of having singularly neglected Andhra right from the beginning. Invoking a Telugu saying, Rao contrasted the centre to a mother who neither provides food nor allows to beg. He argued neither the centre is taking up the execution of projects like Polavaram or Telugu Ganga projects, nor allow the states to execute them. What's the reason? He asked. Just 2 days earlier, on 15th of August 1987, India had marked 40 years of independence. The celebration, however, soon gave way to a stark review of nation's first 4 decades. And the picture it painted unsettled many in parliament. For TDP MP AJVB Maheswara Rao, it was most unfortunate that 40 years after attaining freedom, the nation still suffered from hunger and poverty. Sri Hari Rao then asked, "What are our achievements for which we can take pride?" For him, mere political independence will not do. Real independence lies in economic independence. Many others questioned decades of lopsided planning that had turned droughts and flood into permanent features of the Indian economy.
For others, the pitiable state of farmers and agricultural laborers, who made up over 65% of the population, was the core issue.
Even abandoned cattle and severe water shortages became major flashpoints. You know that if the cattle die, from where the milk will come? Asked Bapulal Malviya, Congress MP. Harish Rawat, MP from Almora, on the other hand, suggested that fodder banks similar to fair price shops should be opened immediately at the block level. The fiercest criticism came from the south. Leading the charge was Sri Hari Rao, who accused the government and the Planning Commission of lacking both vision and long-term planning. For Sri Hari Rao, it was bad planning that was responsible for the sad state of affairs. He pointed out that in the last 40 years, it was the Congress that has been in power for 38 years, hence liable to take all responsibility for this kind of lopsided planning. For some, the last remaining hope lay in divine intervention. It was U.H. Patel who urged that sannyasis and holy men be called upon to perform yagnas and pray to God to be benign to us, to make rain in this grave situation. From the ramparts of the Red Fort, Rajiv Gandhi reassured a worried nation. In his Independence Day address, he had declared that while managing the drought would require collective effort, our granaries are full. However, Gandhi also issued a note of caution. The drought, he argued, should not become a reason to halt country's progress. He said, by stalling development, by suspending development, we will have to face a greater crisis in the days to come. We have to find resources that without reducing or slowing the pace of development, we can face the present challenge. Beneath every argument lay one common thread: India's overwhelming dependence on agriculture. The elephant in the room had become impossible to ignore. Would Indian agriculture and the economy at large ever break free from the vagaries of monsoon? Amid the relentless attacks in parliament, another high-stakes geopolitical controversy was unfolding in the background, one that would reshape India's future technological ambitions. India was soon to receive its first supercomputer, though it was an inferior model to what it originally wanted. The lesson from the drought woes was clear. India had to be better prepared. The first step towards that preparedness lay in the early detection of extreme weather events. The answer, however, lay halfway across the world. India had its eyes on the Cray XMP-24 supercomputer, an American marvel. For India, however, it was more than just a computer. It was about survival. It was a means of rewriting the fate of millions whose lives were affected by uncertainties of monsoon. Gandhi's government argued that Cray could transform weather prediction by processing vast amounts of meteorological data in just a few days instead of weeks. Acquiring the machine was never going to be a cakewalk. India and US, after all, were not exactly all weather friends. As India knocked on Washington's door, it found itself caught amid the looming clouds of Cold War politics. India's neutrality and its close ties with the Soviet Union had long bred unease in the White House. A lingering fear emerged in Washington. What if this technology found its way into the hands of Soviets, or that India could use it to develop nuclear weapons? The Cray supercomputer was a double-edged sword. As the New York Times observed on 11 December 1986, the machine's potential application in military and nuclear weapons program lay at the heart of US concerns. Approving the sale would also break new grounds, as a Washington Post article reported on 7 July 1986. It would make India the first non-Western country to receive technology that the US had, until then, reserved only for its closest allies. With that, a commercial deal was transformed into a highly sensitive technological negotiation wrapped in suspicion, mistrust, and year-long diplomatic bargain. No amount of Indian assurances that the Cray would be used solely for weather forecasting could ease Reagan administration's concern. Tempers flared, and negotiations repeatedly staggered on the verge of collapse. Frustrated by the deadlock, India even briefly explored the possibility of buying a Japanese supercomputer instead. After months of grueling talks, a breakthrough finally appeared in sight. US confirms tentative deal on supercomputer, declared in Indian Express headline on 13 December 1986. The Cray was expected to cost up to $20 million. On 25 March 1987, John Gunther Dean, the US ambassador to India, arrived in New Delhi carrying a letter from Ronald Reagan to Rajiv Gandhi. Reagan wrote, "We informed you that we would agree to the sale contingent on an appropriate safeguard agreement. The export of a supercomputer to India. I believe that the sale will lay a strong foundation for a new era of collaboration, utilizing some of the most modern technology available for advancing India's development."
I am delighted to welcome once again Prime Minister Gandhi to the White House. Prime Minister and I have had useful discussions on the status of U.S.-Indian relations. We noted that in the years since our meeting in 1985, substantial progress has been made to consult regularly to ensure that U.S. supercomputer exports to India reflect the rapid pace of scientific advances, while at the same time safeguarding U.S. technology.
The price, however, was not just monetary. US to give not so supercomputer blared an Indian Express headline on 4th March 1987. India had to settle for a less sophisticated model, the single processor Cray XMP14 instead of the dual processor model originally requested, and came along with it was strict US conditions governing its use. Yet this bittersweet Cray episode served as a powerful reminder that reliance on foreign technology was unreliable. Within a year, India established the Center for Development of Advanced Computing in 1988, eventually paving the way for nation's first indigenous supercomputer, the Param 8000. However, as August arrived, so did a glimmer of hope for the country. Whether it was the prayers and the yagnas of sannyasis or the government's timely intervention is impossible to say. The much-awaited monsoon had finally arrived. In the past, droughts of this magnitude had brought widespread rural distress and weakened purchasing power. So did this one. Yet the drought of 1987 told a slightly different tale, one of resilience, one that quietly altered the course of Indian economy. According to the Economic Survey 1988-89, while agricultural output declined by around 2%, partially cushioned by strong rabi production, industry and infrastructure sustained high growth, allowing the real gross national product to expand by 3.6%. It reflected what the Economic Survey described as a relatively subdued impact of supply shocks in agriculture on the overall economy, a significant departure from the past.
Structurally, I argue that from 79-80, there was a structural shift where from the agriculture sector being the largest sector, it became the services sector, which became the largest sector. And that's why, in spite of the drought, the severe drought in 87, which affected agriculture very much, the economy continued to grow. The GDP continued to show a positive growth. And that's been the case ever since then. So in a sense, agriculture's role in the economy, even though food is very important, but in terms of growth, in terms of GDP, etc., its role has come down. Not broken free because food still matters. and for especially the unorganized sector. The unorganized sector employs 94%. So even though some part of the unorganized sector may be contract employees in the organized sector, but the unorganized sector by definition means that they're not able to bargain for their wages. So when the inflation goes up, do their wages go up correspondingly, right? Then inflation would not matter. But what happens is that the wages don't go up as much as the prices go up. So their real purchasing power goes down. So the unorganized sector gets hit. It's the organized sector which doesn't get hit as much by this drought, etc. So it's not as if we are protected from the vagaries. We have to see which segment is affected.
Agriculture may no longer determine GDP to the same extent, but it still shapes inflation, rural incomes, and the purchasing power of millions in the unorganized sector.
Not decoupled, but you can say that over the years, the relation has become somewhat weak. That's all. But decoupling means, let whatever happens to agriculture doesn't matter to overall GDP. It matters a whole lot. 43% of your workforce is engaged in agriculture. What happens to their incomes? And then still 60% of people in this country have diets which are based on cereals. So what happens to their expenditure? In this country, for the next 20 years, you cannot say that agriculture and overall economy are totally delinked. No way. The economy prospers when the masses gain. And masses are still in agriculture. 43% of your workforce is still in agriculture, and they will suffer.
The drought of 1987 thus signaled a structural shift in the Indian economy, which has gradually broken free from the vagaries of the monsoon. However, complete independence remains a distant goal. Thank you and keep watching ThePrint.